Hi, I'm Tamsin. And at my sister's wedding, I was served a moldy sandwich on purpose. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how everyone kept eating like nothing happened. The worst part was knowing I helped plan a day I was never really invited to be part of. They used my ideas, erased my name, cut me from the photos, and then acted surprised when I stood up and walked away. But when I left that room, something else started to unravel. Why did it take one ruined plate to expose years of quiet betrayal? And what happens when the person they tried to erase finally becomes the story? The gravel beneath the rental car crunched like a warning. Santa Barbara's late summer sun painted the hills gold, but the air inside the car felt colder than it should. I turned off the ignition and sat for a moment, staring at the villa sprawled out ahead like a perfectly rehearsed performance. It was grand, curated, and sterile, in a way that didn't welcome warmth, much like the family waiting inside. I popped the trunk, pulled out my lone suitcase, and adjusted my blouse in the rearview mirror. A wrinkle ran across the collar, the only one I hadn't managed to iron out that morning. It figured. Everything else about me today felt slightly off, slightly behind. I hadn't seen Melis in 11 months and 13 days. Not that I was counting. The last time was Thanksgiving, when she accidentally forgot I was vegetarian and served turkey and everything. That day, I told myself to let it slide. Today, I promised myself to stay gracious. It was her wedding, after all. Maybe this time, things would feel more mutual. The front doors of the villa swung open before I knocked. My cousin Brent greeted me, thrusting a clipboard into my hands without eye contact. "You're early," Melis said to double-check the seating chart. Before I could respond, he disappeared inside. Curious, I glanced at the sheet. And there it was. Tamsin R. Tamsin. No last name, not even the courtesy of a full identity. I stared at the misprint like it was someone else's name, someone I almost recognized. I forced a smile, the kind you make when you trip on the sidewalk and pretend it didn't happen. What stung wasn't the error, it was the feeling that it wasn't an error at all. I folded the paper and slid it into my purse. The welcome dinner was already underway when I arrived on the patio. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, and waiters in all black served hors d'oeuvres to clusters of people I barely knew. A coordinator with a clipboard ushered me toward the far end. "Table 23, she said, pointing to a small round table tucked next to the hallway leading to the restrooms. I looked around. My aunts, uncles, and even second cousins were at tables near the stage. I was closer to the janitor's closet than the toast podium. I sat quietly, folding the linen napkin on my lap. Someone walked past and glanced down at me with confusion, then kept moving. I didn't blame them. I barely looked like I belonged. The music was pleasant enough. The shrimp cocktail on the table glistened under the lighting. I took a sip of water, my mouth dry from hours of driving and too much pretending. A man leaned over, gesturing to me with a half smile. "Hey, are you one of the vendor team? Could we get another fork at table 4? I blinked. "No, im family." He paused. "Oh, sorry, he wasn't." And I didn't correct him further. A waiter passed with a tray of champagne. He skipped me. He wasn't trying to be rude. I was simply not seen. I tried to catch Melis's eye during the dinner, but she was laughing loudly at table 1, clinking glasses with people who looked like they belonged in a bridal magazine. Her white jumpsuit sparkled under the canopy lights. She looked beautiful, untouchable, and I wearing the dress I had second-guessed at least 4 times felt like a background blur. I told myself that was okay. I wasn't here for the spotlight. Later that evening, I retreated to my room. Technically, it was the basement, a converted guest room with no windows and a lingering smell of mildew. I dragged my suitcase inside, sat on the edge of the bed, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding since lunch. I unzipped the bag slowly. Inside were 3 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, and a printed card I had written weeks ago for Melissa note to be slipped into her bridal gift bag. It spent hours choosing the words. Now, it sat folded between my sandals and a travel-sized deodorant. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I stared at the card and thought about the seat near the restroom, the misspelled name, the vendor comment. It's not about the seat, I realized. It's about what the seat says. The next hour passed in silence. I ironed my dress for the ceremony, set my alarm, replied to Nadine's check-in text with a simple "made it." Then I looked in the mirror, straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin. If they wanted me invisible, they'd get polite invisibility. No more, no less. It wasn't just the dress. It was the way they made me feel like I should be grateful to be in the photo at all. That thought curled around my chest as I stirred my coffee the next morning in the villa's communal kitchen, long before anyone else had wandered in. The sun hadn't even risen all the way yet, but the wedding coordinator was already giving orders. Somehow, my name had been added to the logistics chain, unofficially, of course. "Can you help lay out the welcome bags?" someone asked, not even looking me in the eye. "Sure," I said, because what else was I going to say? No one ever asked if I wanted to be involved. They just assumed I'd show up, roll up my sleeves, and pick up the slack. By 8 a.m., I had arranged flowers on 4 tables, helped pin signage on a foam board my Ellis had claimed as her custom idea, and directed 2 lost vendors to the main tent. Everything felt strangely familiar. The blush and olive color scheme, the hanging Edison lights, the calligraphy-style signs. All of it. Mine. A year ago, Malis called me crying, fresh off another breakup. She wasn't even engaged then. But she said, "I just want to dream, you know? Just in case." I stayed on the phone with her that entire Sunday. By the end of the call, I'd created a shared Pinterest board, a budget worksheet, and a full mock itinerary. I even picked out the walk-down song and acoustic cover of something she claimed was too indie, until this week, when suddenly it was perfectly her. Now she was in full wedding mode, breezing past me with a Bluetooth earpiece and a clipboard she didn't need. I heard her talking to the photographer. I designed every detail. I've been dreaming of this my whole life. I didn't flinch. I didn't correct her. I didn't even roll my eyes. But something in my chest shifted like drywall cracking under pressure. Nadine found me a few minutes later behind the catering truck, stuffing discarded flower stems into a black bag. "Did I miss the part where she gave you credit for, all of this?" she asked. I let out a short breath through my nose. "It's her day." "No," Nadine said, arms crossed. "It's your work. This is your layout. I remember this exact setup in your sketchbook." I gave a small shrug. Apparently, I was just brainstorming, nothing official. "Tam," she said, dropping her voice, "you can't keep letting them write you out of your own chapters." I knew she was right, but the habit of silence is hard to break when it's been your language for years. At brunch, the MC raised his mimosa and called Malis the mastermind behind this entire production. A ripple of applause followed. My aunt leaned over to say, "She really outdid herself." I smiled. Not because I agreed, but because I was too tired to frown. Later, I watched Milas receive compliments like oxygen gracefully, performatively, while I lugged crates of bottled water from one end of the tent to the other. "How do you scream when no one's listening?" I thought. "You don't. You just set your jaw, carry another crate, and keep your head down." Back in my room, I peeled off my name tag. It read, "Staff access only," though no one had officially given it to me. I stared at the cracked mirror above the sink and saw a woman who'd allowed herself to be drafted into a story she no longer recognized. I thought about the guest book my design, the wax seal on the invitations my idea, the seating chart arrangement mine, down to the last placeholder. If I disappeared now, I whispered to the reflection, this wedding would still wear my fingerprints. Later that afternoon, I stood near the photo booth, restocking the prop table, when Maëlys waved at a group of guests. We couldn't have done this without the incredible team I hired. That was the moment something snapped. Not loud or dramatic, just a clean internal rip. Nadine appeared again beside me, sensing it. "You okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Just tired." She didn't buy it. Tired of helping or tired of being erased? I didn't answer. I was still working that out myself. I wasn't angry yet. I was just tired of folding my worth into corners they'd never look at. It wasn't just the heirloom. It was the way they looked at me, like I had no right to want something passed down. That thought clung to me like humidity as I zipped open the garment bag hanging at the end of my bed. My fingers paused at the plastic seam. Something felt off. Inside, instead of the custom jade green dress I had carefully selected and shipped ahead 2 weeks ago, there was a pale beige cocktail dress. The fabric looked like hotel drapery, lifeless, shapeless. 2 sizes too big. A small tag clung to the neckline. Approved Vera. I stared at it, waiting for the punchline. Nothing came. Just silence and the dull hum of air conditioning. I found my mother in the upstairs foyer, arranging candles with a woman from the venue team. "Mom," I said, holding the hanger like it had personally insulted me. "Where's the dress I sent?" She didn't even glance at the bag. That one didn't work with the rest of the palette. We had to switch it. We? It's Mayla's wedding, honey. There's a look. The aesthetic matters. I waited for a second, hoping she'd backtrack, soften it, say something remotely maternal. Instead, she added, "You'll look fine. Just press it." I wanted to ask her who else had been consulted, who decided that my personal style was a problem. But I didn't. I turned and walked back down the hall, her voice echoing after me. "Just don't make this about you." The dress hung on me like a borrowed coat. In the mirror, I looked faded like a placeholder rather than a participant, a blur at the edge of someone else's celebration. I remembered a conversation with Mylis from 2 years ago, when we were both still pretending to be sisters instead of occasional acquaintances. She had said, "It's not about how you feel, it's about how you look next to me." It had sounded like a joke back then. Now it felt like the mission statement of the entire weekend. The pre-dinner photos began as golden light spread across the lawn. I kept to the edge of the group, not speaking unless spoken to. I thought I could just disappear into the folds of the wrong dress, and no one would notice. That illusion shattered when my mother, during the family welcome toast, pulled out a velvet box. "Mylis," she said, her voice a practiced blend of pride and softness, "your grandmother always said this belonged with the woman who best carried her grace." She opened the box to reveal a gold pendant. I recognized it instantly. The one from our grandmother, the one Dad kept in his desk after her funeral. He used to say, "This goes to both of you. You'll know when the time's right." Apparently, the time had come. For one of us. Mylis beamed and clasped it to her chest like she'd won something earned. A few guests clapped. I couldn't move. Vera leaned in near me, whispering without looking, "She needs it more. You wouldn't wear it anyway." My throat tightened, but I smiled. Of course I did. Because I'd learned early that showing emotion in our family was like bleeding in a pool you'd only attract more bites. I found a quiet corner of the garden after dinner, just beyond the hedge where no one was likely to stumble upon me. The sky was slipping from gold to navy. I stood there in the beige dress, my arms crossed, watching as Maylis posed with the pendant in front of sparklers and flower arches. She looked radiant. She always did. Someone laughed behind her. Another guest asked where she got her necklace. She said, "It's been in the family for generations. No mention of me." No need, apparently. I leaned back against the tree trunk and closed my eyes. In my memory, I could still hear Dad's voice during our last Thanksgiving together. "You've got your grandmother's strength. Quiet doesn't mean weak, but quiet can be invisible." And I was done being edited out. I opened my eyes and looked back toward the patio lights. The dress itched around the shoulders. The necklace I didn't receive hung on someone else's chest, and the history we once shared had been curated for display. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But I wasn't going to smile through it anymore. I held my wine glass tight, but it wasn't the glass that was close to breaking. The slideshow began, and the room dimmed. But the cut they made in me was still sharp in the dark. Earlier that evening, Eid glanced over the printed photo list on the coordinator's clipboard. My eyes scanned the names under core family portraits. I wasn't listed, not once. No footnote, no asterisk. Just omitted. When I asked the photographer, a kind enough man from Fresno, with a nervous smile, he looked genuinely confused. "You're not on the list? Maybe we'll add you in at the end," he offered, shifting his weight awkwardly. Vera passed behind us just then, hearing enough to insert herself smoothly. "Let them do this quickly," she said. "We'll get one with you later." Later never came. I stood off to the side near a patch of hedges as Mylise posed in front of a floral arch, flanked by our parents, a dozen cousins, and the in-laws I hadn't even met yet. Her laugh, carefully projected to seem effortless, echoed across the lawn. The camera flashed. Then again. I waited through 5 groupings. No one called my name. Nadine stood beside me, arms crossed. "You know this isn't an accident," she said, voice low. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence sat heavy in my throat, metallic, bitter. It had a taste now like rust. Later, in the prep area for the rehearsal dinner, I found Vera arranging name cards. "Can I say something tomorrow? Just a few words during the toast?" She didn't even look up. "We want to keep it elegant. The flow is already tight. I'm not trying to hijack anything. Just a small moment." She finally met my eyes, the corners of her mouth tight. "You and Malus have always had a complicated dynamic. We just want to avoid anything awkward." There it was, complicated. The word people use when they mean too messy to acknowledge, but too public to deny. It's a word that gives people permission to shut you out without explanation. It's not just the mic they took, it's the right to even whisper. By the time dinner started, I was back at my assigned table, again near the kitchen. Again close to the swinging door where servers bustled in and out with trays. I didn't recognize half the people around me, and none of them made eye contact. The MC began his warm-up with the crowd, joking about how lucky Malus was to have so many creative genes and an innate sense of style. I sipped my wine, not because I was thirsty, but because it gave me something to do with my hands. A cousin Jessica, I think, stood to make a toast. She called Malus the heart of this family. Everyone clapped. I clapped too. Muscle memory. As the servers refilled glasses, a woman I didn't know leaned over and asked me, "Are you with the planning team? Everything is just so seamless." "No," I replied. "I'm the sister." She blinked, then said nothing. The silence was louder than her question. I remembered another time my college graduation. The mic had cut out just as I began my speech. They never fixed it. That was the first time I learned that silence could be engineered. I smiled for the group pictures, posed with guests who still didn't know my name, smiled when someone asked if I could help refill the drink station. I corrected them once twice at most. Then I stopped, because it takes energy to prove you belong, and I had none left to spare. As I stood in line at the dessert table, Nadine came up behind me, her voice gentle but steady. "They don't get to erase you if you don't vanish yourself." I didn't reply. I just nodded. But something inside me was beginning to shift, not loud, not even visible, but firm. Like a door I hadn't touched in years was unlocking by itself. I raised my glass, but not for the toast. It was the only thing I had left to lift. The lights dimmed for the slideshow. I already knew my face wouldn't be there. The guests clustered in small groups around the large screen set up in the courtyard. A few had already pulled out their phones, ready to record the moment for Instagram stories. Mylus stood near the front, glass in hand, eyes shining. I stayed toward the back, not out of shyness, but because I had learned exactly where they expected me to be. Soft music began to play, and a slideshow of childhood photos filled the screen. There was Malus, dressed as a fairy princess. Then Malus at soccer practice, Malus with our parents at Yosemite, Malus on her college move-in day. It went on like that for nearly 5 minutes. Not one image of me. Not even the group photos I remembered being in. One frame flickered too quickly to process, but I recognized the background. I'd been standing next to her in that shot once. Even pixels have learned how to forget me. The final slide faded into black, and polite applause followed. Malis dabbed the corner of her eye like it was all too beautiful to bear. I looked around. Not a single head turned my way. I made my way toward the back, searching the crowd, then stepped away from the patio lights and into the side garden. The moment my heels hit the grass, I spotted Nadine pacing near a row of rosemary bushes, phone clutched in her hand. She looked furious. "I couldn't find you inside," I said, relieved just to see someone who hadn't forgotten I existed. She turned. "They never assigned me a seat. What?" I RSVP'd twice. Malis even texted back a thumbs up months ago. But when I asked the coordinator, she said I wasn't on the list. No seat, no meal, nothing. I swallowed hard. "That's not a mistake." "No," Nadine said flatly. "It's not. It's a message." I sat down on a stone bench, the weight of the night finally hitting. "You think they did it just to keep you away from me?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened her phone and started scrolling. "Look at this." She held it out. It was a screenshot of the wedding website's back-end editor. One tab labeled Bridal Party. Another, VIP Guests. In the cached version she'd saved months ago, my name was there. Listed plainly, Maid of Honor Tamsin Rowe. "That's not live anymore," she said. I checked again today. "Your name was scrubbed." "Completely." "I didn't even know I'd been listed." "I thought I was being left out quietly," I murmured. Turns out, it was designed. We sat there a few more minutes in silence, the muffled sound of the DJ warming up drifting through the hedges. Then I said, without looking at her, "I sent in a video for the slideshow. A short one. Nothing dramatic. Just a memory." She turned. "It wasn't there." I know. I hadn't meant to ask about it, but it burned too much not to say anything. When it checked with the AV guy, he just said, "Sorry, only approved files made it through." "Approved by who?" I asked him. He didn't answer. Now, with Nadine beside me and the digital proof glowing on her phone, I felt something crack, not a sob, not a breakdown, just clarity. I'd spent years choosing silence, thinking it was maturity. Nadine stood and brushed dirt off her dress. "You don't owe them grace when they've built an entire event on erasing you." I looked up. Silence is noble until it becomes permission. Exactly. I didn't storm back into the party. I didn't shout or throw wine or flip a table. But I didn't smile either. Not when I walked past Malis and she gave me a knowing glance. Not when Vera complimented my professional attitude. And certainly not when the MC asked me to help collect used glasses since you're floating around. I simply walked past all of them. Not with rage, with decision. I was done covering for them. And for once, the cut they made wasn't going to heal clean. If they wouldn't give me a seat at the table, I'd walk away before they offered crumbs. The server brought my plate. I looked down and saw mold where dignity should have been. Dinner had just begun. Waiters moved fluidly between tables, their black aprons sharp against the blush and ivory color scheme Malis claimed to have invented. Silver dome lids lifted in rhythm like choreography, roasted salmon, herb chicken, vegan risotto. The scents mingled delicately in the air. Then came mine. A single white plate, no lid, no steam. Just a dry sandwich ham and cheese, I think, and bread, that was visibly green near the crust. A dark, fuzzy patch peeked from beneath the top slice. I didn't move right away. The room around me buzzed on, forks tapping porcelain, someone laughing too loudly near the stage. I stared at the plate, eyes tracing the ridges of mold like it might rearrange into something I could pretend was edible. But it didn't. A soft gasp came from the woman seated 2 chairs down. She leaned slightly forward, then quickly turned away, choosing to ignore what she'd seen. That choice, like so many others this weekend, was its own kind of cruelty. I raised a hand discreetly, signaling a passing server. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my tone light. "There must be some mistake." He glanced at the plate, then at his tray. "That's what I have for this seat. Marked with your name. No substitutions, sorry. Can you check with the coordinator?" He paused, then nodded and walked off. He never came back. I scanned the room. Malis was seated at the head table, glowing as usual. Vera, just 2 seats over, made eye contact with him brief, sharp and then looked away. She knew, she saw, and she decided it wasn't her problem. I didn't push the plate away, I didn't touch it either. I let it sit there, in front of me, like a quiet declaration. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. A final one. The conversations resumed. Laughter swelled again as glasses clinked. Someone from across the table smiled politely and whispered, "You're handling this with so much grace." I managed a nod. Grace. The word people love to use when they expect you to keep swallowing pain without gagging on it. My appetite dissolved. Still, I remained seated, hands folded in my lap. Calm, present, watching the performance unfold. A few minutes passed before I reached for my phone. I angled the lens down and took a photo just the plate, with the untouched sandwich and its rotting edge. No filter, no caption. I sent it to Nadine with a single line. They finally said it out loud, just not in words. Her reply came fast. "You don't have to stay, T." My fingers hovered above the screen. Then I looked up, slowly, at the ballroom around me. They weren't watching. No one ever did. I folded my napkin. Neatly, precisely. I placed it on the plate like I was wrapping the whole thing as a gift to return unopened. Then I stood. The motion was small, almost gentle, but something shifted in the air around me. A few heads turned. Conversations paused. A fork clattered against a plate somewhere behind me. I didn't speak. I didn't offer a speech or explanation. I didn't need to, because the sound of my heels against the marble was the loudest thing in the room. Each step away from that table, each step toward the doors, wasn't about escape. It was a decision, a quiet, deliberate declaration. I was done being the joke they told, without ever saying the punchline aloud. As I crossed the threshold of the reception hall, the air outside hit me like truth. Cool, crisp, indifferent. I welcomed it. Behind me, the music played on. The laughter returned. But this time, it didn't touch me. The sound of my footsteps faded behind me, but something else was beginning to stir. The silence I left behind became a question they couldn't unhear, and Nadine was already recording. I sat on a wooden bench just beyond the back terrace, far enough to be out of sight, but close enough to hear the low hum of a crowd, confused by a void they couldn't name. The night air had cooled, but the heat in my chest hadn't faded since I walked away. I watched the moon rise slow and indifferent, while voices inside the reception began to shift from celebration to speculation. "She always has a flair for drama," someone said near the doors, just loud enough to be overheard. The words landed like a shrug disguised as a dagger. "She's always had emotional sensitivities," Vera added later, when another guest asked about my sudden exit. I didn't hear it firsthand. Nadine played it back for me from a clip she'd captured. The way Vera said it, so measured, so polite, it made it worse. As if my boundary was a symptom. As if my silence was evidence of instability. They didn't see me walk out. They saw an excuse to protect their version. Inside, Nadine kept filming. She wasn't flashy about it, didn't call attention to herself. Just held her phone low and steady as she narrated. This was her seat. That was her plate. That's mold. This is not okay. She posted it with the caption, "When Grace gets molded over." By the time she joined me on the bench, her phone was vibrating with alerts. "It's spreading," she said, showing me the notifications. "People are sharing it already." "Sharing what?" I asked. "The truth." A few moments later, another video started circulating, this one from a family friend who had noticed my plate earlier. She had filmed the untouched sandwich, then quietly approached a server. "Why was that served?" she asked off camera. The server's voice was nervous but clear. "That's what I was told to put there." "By who?" He hesitated. "The coordinator." She said it was a special instruction. By the time the fourth person posted their version of events, whispers inside the reception turned into something heavier, tension with edges. Clark approached Malus near the head table. I couldn't hear his exact words, But his expression carried concern more than confusion. "What's going on?" he seemed to ask. "Why are people filming your sister's plate?" Malus waved it off, lips curling into that smile she reserved for inconvenient truths. "She's always been dramatic. This isn't about her." But it was no longer about me. Not really. One by one, heads turned toward their screens instead of the stage. Conversations quieted. People weren't just watching the wedding anymore. They were watching the story unravel from every corner of the room. They weren't reading a script anymore. They were reading a thread. My phone lit up with texts I never expected. From my cousin, Eliza. "You okay?" "This isn't right." From a college friend I hadn't seen in years. "Just saw the video. You didn't deserve that." Even Aunt Ruth, who hadn't spoken to me since the baby shower fiasco 3 years ago, wrote, "I'm so sorry, Tamsin. I didn't reply to any of them, not yet." For once, people weren't asking why I was upset. They were asking what had been done to me. I looked at Nadine. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I leaned back against the bench, letting the chorus of crickets fill the silence. I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. But the truth had finally changed hands. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone in it. I didn't raise my voice. I just let the silence speak louder, and this time, the world heard it. But I hadn't seen the video yet. Not the one that would make the wedding stop mid-toast. I didn't go back in. But a voice from the past reached me and reminded me what I still carried. Nadine and I had drifted to the bench near the fountain, a quiet corner far enough from the reception hall to breathe. The sound of clinking glasses, laughter, and faint music reached us like a distant performance it already left behind. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, frowned. "Check the screen." "What screen?" I asked. "Inside." Someone didn't vet the slideshow. My stomach tightened. I pulled up the livestream. The video had just cut to black after a sweet montage of Maëlys and Clark dancing in slow motion. Then the screen glitched just for a second and another video began. It wasn't edited. It wasn't polished. And it wasn't meant to be seen. Maëlys' voice filled the room. "Tamsin?" "I only invited her so no one would say I didn't." Laughter hers. "She's just dramatic. Always has been. Let her sit in the back and sulk." The crowd inside went silent. No more music. No more polite laughter. A fork clattered against a plate. I couldn't see the faces in the room, but Nadine's camera caught enough eyes widening, people whispering, Clark frozen in place, shoulders stiff. I said nothing. I didn't have to. Clark turned to Maëlys slowly. "Did you say those things?" She hesitated. "It was just venting." "Everyone vents." "You recorded yourself venting?" "It wasn't for anyone else. Someone must have played in front of 150 people," he interrupted, eyes narrowing. "On our wedding day." And that was it. The unraveling began. Guests who'd been smiling minutes ago now checked their phones. Screens lit up across the hall as people replayed the clip. I saw the ripple of it from afar, heads turning, hands covering mouths, some rising from their seats. One older woman near the front stood and quietly exited. A younger cousin shook her head. "This explains the plate. This explains everything." I stayed where I was, beside the fountain. I didn't need to see more. I already knew the sound of collapse. Inside, the wedding coordinator scrambled to cancel the next segment. The toast schedule was discarded. Music faded out mid-track. Nadine's video already posted had hit 30,000 views and rising. Someone texted me. "They're falling apart in there. You okay?" Another. "You didn't deserve any of this." We see it now. I scrolled through the notifications, not to feed ego, but to remind myself my voice hadn't broken through. Theirs had. And sometimes, the truth needs 1,000 echoes before it lands. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. From across the lawn, I watched a floral sign with Maëlys and Clark's initials fall as a gust of wind swept through. A crew member picked it up and propped it back in place, but the frame was crooked now. Slightly off, like the illusion of perfection had given way to gravity. By morning, One of the event sponsors pulled their logo from the venue. The makeup artist posted on her stories, "I regret working this event. No one deserves to be treated that way." I remained in the shadows, watching. And in that quiet, I heard my own voice, not out loud, but steady inside. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted to stop being rewritten. They still had the music, the lights, the flowers. But without the lie, the wedding had no script left. The morning after, the villa was still. Not silent in a suffocating way, just absent of all the noise that had once filled it. No clinking silverware, no half-hearted laughter, no footsteps pacing the hallways looking for someone to blame or dismiss. Just the soft rustle of birds outside, weaving between olive branches, and the occasional groan of the wooden floor beneath my feet as I moved one last time through rooms I'd never been truly welcomed in. I zipped my suitcase slowly, not because I had much left to pack, but because my mind was still unpacking everything that had happened. Every insult, every silence that screamed, every smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. On the hallway table near the door, there was a name card-folded and waiting. I hesitated before picking it up, as if touching it might open up another wound. But I flipped it open anyway. Tamsin. Still spelled wrong. I let out the faintest smile. Not bitter, not broken, just quiet. Detached. I folded the card and slipped it into the side pocket of my bagknot as a keepsake. Not for sentiment, but as a receipt. A reminder of how they never really saw me, even when I was standing right in front of them. Tucked in the back of my backpack, behind an old planner, was a notebook I hadn't opened since I got here. Out of habit more than intention, I pulled it out while waiting for the car service. A single page, loose and yellowed at the corners, floated out and landed in my lap. It was in my dad's handwriting. "If they forget who you are," it read, "remind them by remembering yourself." I sat there frozen for a beat, my fingers trembling slightly as I held the page. It didn't make me cry. Not this time. Instead, it wrapped around my chest like something warm. Familiar. Grounding. He had written that long ago, but somehow he had seen all of this coming. Maybe not in detail, but he'd sensed the quiet unraveling, the erasure, the need to hold on to yourself when others try to rewrite who you are. I folded the page carefully, like it was something alive, and placed it gently back into the notebook. My phone stayed quiet. No calls, no apologies. Not from Melis. Not from Vera. Not even one of the cousins with a half-hearted excuse or "that was awkward, huh?" Only one message arrived. It was from Vera. 7:43 a.m. "Hope you're okay." I stared at the screen. Typed 3 words. Deleted them. Typed 1. Deleted that too. Eventually, I just turned off the screen. There was nothing I could send that wouldn't shrink me back into someone I wasn't anymore. A few minutes later, Nadine arrived. 2 coffees in hand, phone glowing in the other. She handed me the drink without a word, and then lifted the screen toward me. "She's trending," she said. "Melis. Brand partners are pulling out. One of them posted this." She tilted the phone so I could read it. "We do not support exclusion or cruelty in any form. Our partnership with Melis Truitt has been terminated." It was clean. Corporate, cold, but final. No PR team could spin this one back into gold. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. There was nothing left to prove. As we drove away from the villa, the coastline came into view. I cracked the window open. The wind came in fresh and sharp, salted by the ocean. It filled my lungs in a way that felt like exhaling a version of me I didn't need anymore. Later that day, I opened my phone again. I tapped on my photos. Found the one I'd taken that night, the Moldy plate, the isolated chair. No caption, just the image. I posted it. Then I put the phone down and walked away. An hour later, I picked it back up. Thousands of comments had poured in. "This happened to me too." I walked away from my family's dinner, never looked back. "Thank you. I needed to see this today." I read each one slowly, like little hands reaching out across time zones and family wounds. I didn't respond to all of them. I didn't have to. Their stories were enough. Their truths had a volume that filled the quiet I used to be afraid of. By sundown, I was standing at the edge of the driveway. No one had asked me to stay. No one had pleaded for a group photo or a goodbye brunch. There were no tears shed over my departure. And strangely, that was freeing. I didn't look back at the villa. I didn't need to. Closure isn't the same as reconciliation. It isn't about hugging it out or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about deciding not to carry what was never truly yours. It's about choosing peace over proof. I slid into the back seat of the rideshare. The driver gave a polite nod, but didn't speak. The window was already halfway down. As we pulled away, the wind tugged at my hair again, brushing my cheek like it remembered me. And for the first time in years, I wasn't running from something. I was driving toward myself. I didn't walk away to prove a point. I walked away to protect my peace. Sometimes we're taught that family means unconditional presence, no matter how much it costs us. But the truth is, family that loves you won't force you to shrink in order to fit their picture. They won't crop you out, mute your voice, or serve you silence and expect gratitude in return. If you've ever sat at a table where you were treated like less than who you are, know this: you can leave. And leaving doesn't mean bitterness, it means choosing yourself when others refuse to. Healing doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with clarity and the courage to walk forward, even if no one follows. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from something or someone to protect your dignity? What did it teach you? Share your story in the comments. Let's turn silence into connection. If this story touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with it, I'd still love to know why your perspective matters. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories that go beyond the surface. Your voice belongs here.